Matt Murdock's life has quite literally become a living hell now that he's being hunted by embodiments of his very own 7 deadly sins. Will he ever overcome? Only if he can manage to best a wrath-possessed Wolverine. All this and more in the pages of Daredevil issue number 7. Let's hop on it together and find out what happens next, shall we? So then, picking up directly from where the last issue left off, Daredevil, clad in white, was still hot on the trail of the Heat, the brand new criminal organization quickly gobbling up all of his beloved Hell's Kitchen. Daredevil's investigation took him all the way to the bar with no name, one of the most famous supervillain hangouts in all of New York City. Only by the time Matt got there, he too quickly learned that Wolverine had beat him there. Worse still, Wolverine is now possessed by the evil sin of wrath and is killing everyone around him. Meaning that no matter how the night started, it's going to end with a fight, and Daredevil doesn't love the idea of having to cross swords with Wolverine. He's fought him once or twice before, and he says that he's only ever barely survived each time. After all, Wolverine is dangerous and deadly at the best of times, but now that he is literally being empowered by the sin of wrath, there's no telling how brutal this fight can get. I'm also realizing that maybe that was the whole reason Daredevil came in here wearing white. You know, it's like when deathmatch wrestlers in GCW come out wearing white because they know things are going to get really violent and they're going to bleed a lot and it's going to make a really cool image on their gear. Matt says in his internal monologue that punching Wolverine is a lot like punching a slab of meat. The only difference is a slab of meat doesn't repair itself while the fight is going on. With no real options at his disposal, Daredevil figures the very least he can do is try and take the fight outside the bar and outside the packed streets and hope that Wolverine doesn't end up hurting anybody else. All the while, Daredevil can't help but ponder too his own relationship to wrath. He's always felt that if any of his sins would end up spelling his end one day, it would be wrath. After all, heroes are supposed to be merciful, they're only ever supposed to use as much force as necessary, but Daredevil fully admits he feels the anger chewing away at him from the inside. He always has, and maybe he always will. This also means that Daredevil just can't simply win the day by doing an exorcism like he did for all of his other super friends who ended up getting possessed. So how does he ultimately end up not getting just cut into millions of ribbons? Well, here's the funny thing, the sin inside Wolverine actually ends up accidentally telling on itself. You see, Wolverine was never actually possessed by wrath at all. In reality, he was possessed by the sin of lust, specifically Matt Murdock's own lust for battle. The ecstasy he always felt when beating down a particularly bad guy, feeling the blood on his knuckles. A part of himself that Matt always admitted he was a little ashamed of. Now, on one hand, this is actually a really interesting twist, making it seem that Matt had to deal with one sin when in reality it was another, but in the back of my mind, I can't help but feel like, oh man, really? Wolverine was the embodiment of lust? Seriously? And it was a lust for fighting? Come on, this is Matt Murdock we're talking about. He's probably one of the biggest man-hoes in all of fiction. You mean you couldn't tell us a story about Matt having to deal with all the women he's humped and dumped over the years? That feels like such a slam dunk, though I suppose if you did do that story, shit would probably end up getting real quick. And hell, this series is already doing more to actually explore the uncomfortable, sinful, dislikable parts of our favorite hero by showing us that he is a bit of a violence junkie. So, you know, let's not also remind people in the same breath that he can also be a bad boyfriend at times. Granted, now that Daredevil finally does know that he's actually dealing with the sin of lust and not the sin of wrath, he's able to accordingly change up his modus operandi. You see, Daredevil ends up tackling Wolverine into the water, which actually ends up serving a double-pronged purpose. One, Wolverine may have amazing healing, but it's not like he can breathe underwater, and two, getting Wolvie wet also serves the purpose of basically doing a baptism ritual. Matt says some holy words and also gets a little insightful into himself and his own lust for violence and how he desperately wants to change and how that's the first step to cleansing your soul. And yeah, with that, the fight is basically won. Wolverine and Daredevil even decide to go back to the bar with no name and have themselves a drink just to show that there's no hard feelings between the two. Wolverine even admits, Matt, not the worst time I've been possessed. Logan also gives Matt some of his own insights. After all, he's the best at what he does, and what he does isn't very nice, but that is Wolverine admitting that he does know himself, and that Matt should also try and strive to know himself, both the good and the bad. And that, you know, a life spent denying who you are is basically no life whatsoever. Matt's saving of all the bar patrons also ends up paying off in a rather unexpected way. It seems that the old leader of the Hell's Kitchen Dragons was actually there and got saved by by Matt, and because of it, he's feeling real generous. The old Dragon's leader, it seems, is the last of his gang, and while he admits him and his people were never saints, they had rules, lines they didn't cross, but the Heat are different. They're dirty cops who make a mockery of everything. And as such, this old gangbanger decides to share with Matt the secret meeting place for the top brass within the Heat. It seems these guys are quite scared of leaving digital paper trails, and because of that, they do everything analog with actual pen and paper. Now, just because Daredevil finally has the information he's been waiting for to blow this case wide open, it still doesn't mean that Father Matt doesn't have to show up to work and do his good deeds for the day, including helping one of the kids in his care navigate the nightmare that is the American healthcare industry so that she can finally get her much-needed inhalers. They even stop at the pet store because the girl asked so nicely, and Matt admits that even though he's going through a lot of hard stuff right now, he still feels like God gives him little gifts and little chances to be his best self. Though, let's face it, it's also pretty damn clear that God continues to test Father Matt as well, because as the comic comes to a close, Elektra ends up slipping into his window at night. But why is she here, and what could she possibly want? Well, I guess you're gonna have to read the next issue with me and find out. And so that was Daredevil issue number 7, everyone, and overall I thought this was a fun little issue. The fight between Wolverine and Daredevil was cool, exciting, really bloody in a way I was not expecting. And the twist about what sin Daredevil was actually fighting was pretty damn clever, even if, as I said before, I cannot help but shake the feeling that we were robbed of a much better, much more compelling lust-centric story. Still though, for what it's worth, what worked about this story worked. Saladin Ahmed is doing a really great job with the pacing on this one. I definitely feel like each issue does a good job being a nice self-contained story in and of itself. And the balance they managed to strike between superhero Daredevil Matt and Father Matt in his civilian life is probably one of the most compelling things about the book. Overall, I would give it a 7.5 out of 10. Hey there everyone, it's your pal Cape Joel again, and if you're seeing my face right now, that means you watched to the end of the video, and I'll always be grateful for that. Retention helps in this crazy YouTube game, and so does becoming a patron. If you head on down to the description, you can find a link to my Patreon page. Recently just redid all the tiers, a lot of cool stuff offering up there, exclusive commentaries, exclusive polls, behind the scenes concept art for Capes and Quest. That's the brand new D&D show I've started soon. Never been a better time to become a patron. You can become a patron for as little as $1 a month and help the channel grow, and help me continue to deliver content like what you just saw. So I want to thank you all, and I will see you again next time. Bye bye.